Greetings, and thanks for joining us once again. My name is Carlos Salinas, and I'm the Regional Director for the U.S. Soybean Export Council in the Americas. This presentation is designed for USEC's key customers around the world and for USEC's internal purposes. We hope that you find it of value, and please continue to send us your feedback so we can improve this presentation. For the record, the information presented in this PowerPoint is as of July 17th. I will be on holidays on the 18th and 19th, and you will be receiving this report on Monday, July 22nd. Let's go ahead and get started. And as we always do, we like to recognize USEC's growing membership. As you well know, within our membership, we have soybean processors, soybean exporters, seed companies, equipment manufacturers, railroads, surveyors, among many other important stakeholders and funding sources. And we never forget the support and the financial contribution that we receive from the U.S. Soybean farmer. Without that support, this presentation would not be possible. So we have a slightly extended agenda today, and I apologize if we take more than our usual 10, 15 minutes. I think the price volatility has been significant, and it merits a deeper analysis. We want to talk about what has happened over the past 12 months, look at some seasonality, and give some perspectives on covering partial needs for your operations. We want to talk about farmer profitability. I want to share with you the Oil World Annual, at least some of the basic information provided in it. The Oil World Annual provides much detail, but we're just going to take a look at the global S&D and global demand. We want to talk about exports to Mexico and soybean prices, CNF China, as well as basis in South America, and how competitive the U.S. is for the September-October window. So let's go ahead and get started. I think many of you have seen the chart I'm about to share. It normalizes the price of different commodities or grains that we produce in the U.S. and products. Starts them at zero and looks at the percentage evolution that we have experienced over the past 12 months. And there's no surprise that many of our commodities have certainly dropped in prices. December wheat is down 21%. December soybean oil is down 20%. December corn, 19% down. November soybeans and the CME down 18% over the past 12 months. Again, and December soybean meal down 16%. So quite a significant shift. And I know many of you have asked me what will happen in the next 30 to 60 days. And the answer is I don't really know. But what I can share with you is what has happened in the past 20 years in the window between July 23rd and August 23rd for soybeans and soybean meal. Now, I will share with you on this next slide some disappointing information because from a seasonality perspective, November soybeans have gone up 50% of the time and they've gone down 50% of the time. However, and I think what's important to keep in mind is that some of the ranges that we have seen in history are a bit different. We've seen that on the upside in 2003, during this time window, during this 30-day time window, soybean prices went up as much as 15%, and they've gone down as much as 9%. And I think what is important is to take a look at this information in context, because, no seasonality, but you have to keep in mind what has happened since the beginning of the year. And I think this is where we have a potential buying opportunity. Maybe not for 100% of your needs for the year, but I think covering a couple of months, 3 months, I think it's very important to take advantage of these prices because year to date, soybean prices have experienced the largest percentage drop in the past 20 years. The information we previously shared was for the past 12 months. This information is year-to-date over the past 12 months. And in this very thick blue line, you can see the soybean prices have been down 15%, according to the information put together by Bloomberg, derived from the CME. But that's a significant drop. And when you take a look at the future, the next 30 days, from a seasonality perspective, 50-50, but yet with some wide ranges on the ups and downs, maybe it is wise to seek some or partial coverage for your hog, poultry, aquaculture operations, and seek some of that equilibrium. Now, you may also want to contact some of our experts within our membership that provide risk management services and tools, because a good opportunity to seek coverage through options or buy some insurance could also be a good way to take advantage of these low price environment. When we take a look at the same analysis for soybean meal, and again, looking at the same window between July 23rd and August 23rd, we see that the seasonality is pretty boring. It's close to 50-50. Okay, 45% of the time, prices have gone up, and 55% they have gone down. But I think one takeaway for soybean meal specifically is that the ranges have been quite significant. Again, 2003, meal was up 18% in this time window. 2017, it was down 11%. And I would qualify it again as a significant buying opportunity, because year-to-date, soybean meal prices have experienced the largest percentage drop in the past 20 years. And I think that's a big takeaway. Taking some coverage and at least a 20%, 30% coverage for the next 12 months, I think would be a wise choice. Again, the soybean meal is down 16% year-to-date. That's the lowest that we've seen year-to-date. So anyway, important information. And I also want to add this slide and talk about farmer profitability. I think if you take a look at data from the Federal Reserve of Kansas City, you can see that from a financial perspective, the ag sector, the production sector, is already struggling. We have many indicators that lead us that, but there is a report that has been put together, recently published July 9th by the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. It seems that in combination with Ohio State University, where they take a look at a central portion of the state of Illinois, one of our very large grain producers, and they take a look at the returns per acre. You can see the operator and land returns at $276 here for 2024. And when you take a look at the cash rents, you can obviously notice that the cash rents are higher, right? And that tells you that if you're an operator in that state today, you're not making money. For sure, it's going to be quite challenging. Yes, land rents could actually go down. It's possible, but we already know that overall the sector is struggling. So by buying 20 or 30% of your needs at these type of levels, you're buying something it's going below the cost of production, simply because we have probably a higher stocks to use ratio. And that's when the report from Oil World comes to the table. Many of you know about Oil World. We'll talk about them before. As it's published, they are an independent global market analyst and forecast since 1958. They're based out of Hamburg, Germany, owned by the Milky family. They provide outstanding information. And I would strongly recommend you get their annual report, because it provides detailed information for about just every country in the world from an oilseed perspective and from an oils and fats perspective as well. But in their projections for 24-25, and I think what has the market wary today and reason for the prices, outside from the slow buying pace that we have seen from different destinations, but the projected stocks to use ratio at the very bottom here is very close to a 30%, a very good uptick from the 26% we had last year. Mainly driven, we do have more production in North America, but for sure the Southern Hemisphere, it has the biggest uptick, where we're going from 217 million metric tons to a projected 236 million metric tons. I talk about projected because the spreadsheet can take just about anything. Oil World does have certainly good basis to come up with this information, but many things can change. One takeaway from this report is that the crush rate globally is increasing to 340 million metric tons from 327. So we see that demand for meal and oil is going to go up. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that in the next few slides. Other uses for soybeans is also increasing. However, when you take a look at production, historical production over the past 4 years, the history that we have here, we see that a standard deviation on production for the southern hemisphere is 13 million metric tons. Again, standard deviation up or down. But if you take normal standard deviation, one standard deviation on this 236 million metric tons on the downside, obviously we're going to be very close, again, to reducing that 30% stocks to use ratio and getting close to the 26%. So again, the U.S. crop hasn't yet been made. Very difficult to forecast the South American crop. We know that weather has been very volatile all over the world. For the same reason, we have Argentina, 22 million metric tons in 22-23. Remember that significant drought that we had. So many things could happen. And I think we have to keep that into context when we talk about the price reduction year to date, and we talk about what could happen in the next 30 days. There's certainly more to the analysis. But from an overall macro perspective, the demand numbers are not bad. According to Oil World, meal demand is going to grow from 256 million metric tons to 266, 67, 10, 11 million metric tons of soybean meal growth. I think that's pretty solid. We have to keep in mind that the U.S. Exports close to 13.8 million metric tons. Well, we're growing demand here by about 11 million metric tons from 23-24 to 24-25. We're also seeing growth in oils and fats. We can talk about the demand or disappearance of palm oil and some of the projections that we have on soybean oil as well. So again, the demand side, the overall picture, it's healthy. I think what we have to look at over here is going to be what's the production going to look like, and certainly weather, as always, will play an important role. Next, I want to talk about soybean export prices, CNF China, and I want to particularly, before I even do that, I want to highlight this chart, which it looks kind of noisy, but I think it's important to pay close attention to it. These are the weekly exports out of Brazil. It's a weekly export pace. And we can see since the beginning of the year what the weekly export pace has been. So you understand this chart. If you look over the past 5 years, right, this is the low range over here. This lower end is the low range of those weekly exports. On top, you see the high range of the weekly exports on this gray graph. And this dotted line that we have on the report is what the average exports have been, those weekly exports over the past 5 years. And the orange line is what the weekly exports have been this year. And we've seen that obviously on the past 60 days, those weekly exports have soared out of Brazil. But take a look at this orange line and how they're declining. And as a matter of fact, the most recent report, July 15th, those weekly exports out of Brazil are even for that specific week, they're below the average. So I think we have to closely monitor that evolution, because that will tell us a lot about what happens and when business begins to shift to the US. But I can already tell you, based on some of the information on prices, particularly for the September window, if we look at the information from our friends, broker Ari Olifar in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, you can see how on June 14th, basis in Brazil for the month of September on paper, the bids were at 50 over. There were no sellers. But when we take a look at the July 16th report, we see that those bids are 110 over and offers 140 over the November. Whichever way you look at it, those numbers are significantly firmer. There are many reasons for that. I think the July-November soybean spread in the CME had a lot to do with it, but certainly as a result, soybean basis in Brazil for those September or those deferred windows are certainly firmer. I think soybean meal is a perfect example. We see that we go back to June 14th, and that O&D window in Brazil was bid at 9, 10 over and offered at 14. Well, now those bids are 18 over and offered at 22 over for that O&D window. So significantly stronger, and I believe we'll continue to see this rationing out of Brazil and slowly and gradually migrating demand out of the U.S. It won't happen immediately, but certainly it looks like it's going to be coming, shifting to the direction of the U.S. When we take a look at another broker, Ag Commodities is a very well-known broker. They quote their values CNF China, and you can see how you look at the September window out of Brazil and the October window of the PNW. You might say, Carlos, you cannot compare September to October. We have to keep in mind that because of the proximity of the PNW to China, October out of the PNW is very close to September is out of Brazil. And you can see how on a CNF basis, we have $473 a metric ton out of Brazil and $470 out of the U.S. When we take a look at simply September out of Brazil against October out of the U.S. Gulf, we see there is an inverse there. The U.S. Gulf competes at $469 a metric ton, right? So we are very close to participating in some of these new crop numbers. Changing directions and switching subjects completely, I want to talk about exports to Mexico. We have been hearing feedback from many of you, many of our customers about logistical issues, challenges with the railroads and even internal logistics within Mexico. I think I heard something about the Ferromex and the port of Veracruz and some issues they're having with tracks. And I wanted to dig a little bit into it. And I think the data, provides some of the answer on what's happening logistically in Mexico. What I did is I took a look at the monthly exports of combined exports of different commodities. I'm looking at some soybeans, soybean meal, soybean oil, corn, wheat, rice, and sorghum. And I apologize, I put soybean oil twice, but the calculation only has it for one. But you can take a look at, let's say, October, November, December, and you can take a look at this pink line, which is 2023. And you can see that already in O&D of last year, of 2023, our levels of volume of all these commodities exported to Mexico were already reaching a high. Maybe 2.7, maybe 2.8 million metric tons, but certainly higher than we had seen before over the past few years, dating back to 2019. However, when we take a look at, when we go further and we take a look at 2024, right, we see this green line representing 2024, and we see how much this flow has increased, reaching a peak in March of 2024 of 3.4 million metric tons, all commodities combined, and remaining very high, not as high as March, but in April and May. And I think this is probably likely the reason why we're seeing a stress in the system, stress on the logistical capacity, on the border crossings, as the industry is getting adjusted to these type of volumes. And maybe investment on infrastructure is needed if these volumes persist. We have a very efficient system, but I think Mexico is taking advantage of the lower prices for many of the grains in the U.S., and it's a great opportunity, and we see that reflected in the flows and the exports to Mexico. So good for Mexico to take advantage of these opportunities for sure. I hope the information shared with you was valuable. Certainly provide us your feedback or your insight. I look forward to speaking to you in about 2.5 weeks. I wish you a very good week, and thanks for taking the time. Take care.